everyone, and welcome to Spaced Out. I'm Sarah Begum, and today my guest, Scott Parazynski, is going to be joining me. He is an American physician, former NASA astronaut, and he's just done incredible things with 5 space shuttles under his belt, space shuttle flights, that is, not shuttles. 7 spacewalks, and he's also the first person to ever have flown in space and summit Mount Everest. One of my dreams. That's incredible. You have authored the book The Sky Below about space, summit, and speed, and you are currently the CEO of Fluidity Tech.
Fluidity, yes.
Fluidity
yes.
Tech. Awesome, and I'm so honored to have you on here. You're my first astronaut. Welcome, Scott.
Great to be with you, Sarah. I'm thrilled to be in that first position, but I'm sure there'll be many more. And sounds like you may become an astronaut one of these days in the not too distant future as well, if all goes per plan, right?
Well, that coming from you has just made my Christmas. That's amazing. Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas. Yeah.
From space, we get to see the Earth, and then we realize how important it is to unite together, and how important it is to protect the Earth. And we're all one. We're all one race, one species. It's incredible. I really wish I had the experiences that you've had, the adventures that you've had, and that's what I'm excited to learn about today.
Well, it's soul stirring, and I know it will affect you profoundly, as it does everyone who has the opportunity to see, their without boundaries, without limits, looking out into the distance, to the beginnings of time. It's extraordinary, life changing, as you say. And knowing what you've already done in your life as an explorer, I have no doubt that you'll find a ride up into space someday. So
thank you.
You'll have to tell me how it goes for you.
Thank you. That's really lovely. But I'm really interested in your background, because it all started from somewhere, and your education is incredible, but it's very unique because you schooled in Senegal, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Greece. How was the experience for you growing up in those countries, and how do you think that shaped your worldview?
Substantially. I had very adventurous parents, and I was an only child, so it made it possible for us to kind of pick up and move to different places. But I think growing up in all these different environments, I realized very quickly that life's greatest education comes outside of the classroom. Actually, not to discount the importance of chalkboard learning and so on, but it's the people that you meet, the adventures that you take, the chances that you turn into opportunity. Those are the things that really shape you. And so what I learned very early on is I wanted to be an explorer. I didn't realize at the time, I didn't call myself an explorer, of course, but I wanted to travel. I wanted to have adventure in my life. And so kind of set my sight on, hopefully one day becoming an astronaut, but I always wanted to be a physician as well. So I developed this long view of how I would become a physician astronaut. I kind of worked relentlessly towards that. But in the environments that I lived and worked, I had the opportunity to work with what we now call multidisciplinary teams, but meeting people from all over the world, seeing the very best in people, and realizing that that's how you tackle the most difficult challenges, by working constructively with lots of different mindsets.
Speaking of which, what was it like being on the International Space Station and working with people of various backgrounds and from different nations together?
It's wonderful. It's a real melting pot, of scientists, engineers, flight controllers, technicians, bringing together the best and brightest minds to do, scientific research for the betterment of humanity. It's a great mission to be able to, do something larger than life. That's something you couldn't do on your own. Being part of this, incredible team, and so it's amazingly rewarding. Most of the job, quite honestly, people might be surprised to hear this, but most of the work of an astronaut is on the ground. It's helping other crews get ready for their missions. It's developing the procedures and the tools to do work on the next big program. So a lot of our work is actually on the ground, as part of this bigger team. And then every 2 or 3 years, you would get this wonderful, incredible perk to go fly in space.
You did 7 spacewalks. 2 of them were with Chris Hadfield. One of them were with the Russian cosmonaut. But your most dangerous one was the one where you had to fix the solar panels. Can you tell me what that was like, and what were the risks involved and how that made you feel?
Well, on my last mission, STS-120, to the International Space Station, we had installed a new interconnecting module called Harmony to the ISS, and part of the work also involved relocating a large solar array truss from the top of the space station, bolting it, disconnecting a bunch of connectors, and then by use of robotic arms, moving it out to the very tip of the space station, bolting it all back together, connecting connectors, and unfurling these large solar panels. And they're about, I guess 35 meters in length. They're rather enormous. And as one of them was being commanded to unfurl, they began to rip apart. And you might think, well, what's the big deal? Just give it more power and force it out. Well, that really wasn't possible. In fact, it was just making the problem worse. The tear was getting larger and larger. We had to do something really innovative in order to save that solar panel. The plan was on the subsequent missions to actually launch European and Japanese modules to the ISS. So the whole space station was critical to the power from the solar panel. And probably more of immediate concern was that if this solar panel wasn't fully rigidized, if we weren't able to get it to its full length, it was a limp noodle. Then it could actually rip apart. It could hit the shuttle, it could hit the space station. It could have a really, really bad situation on our hands. So over the next 72 hours, people working around the clock in mission control in Houston and other places in the United States came up with this brilliant plan to get the spacewalker. I was the lead spacewalker, so I was the guinea pig to get to go do this work. But they strapped me on the end of this 30-meter long robotic structure that had never been cobbled together this way before, and waved me out to the very tip of the space station to sew this thing back together. And it was really an extraordinary effort on so many different levels, from the brilliant engineers and flight controllers and mission control to the difficult robotics that Stephanie Wilson, who's potentially a future moonwalker. By the way, she just got announced as one of the Artemis 18 astronauts. So I'm really proud of her and excited for her future. But she was the person at the robotic arm, along with a friend of mine, Dan Taney, to get me out there. And then Doug Wheelock was out on the spacewalk with me, and he had some really challenging work to do at the base of the solar array. And then Pam Melroy, my commander, was kind of coordinating everything from inside the space shuttle. So it was this really extraordinary choreography that at the 11th hour sort of fell on my shoulders. The very last bit of it, which was to cut out this frayed guide wire that had ripped the solar panel apart and install 5 of, we called them cufflinks, but they were pieces of wire about 1.5 meters in length across the damage site. And so I felt quite a bit of pressure, I have to say. There was.
What was going through your head? What were you thinking?
Well, so there was some peril associated with the spacewalk because it was a fully energized solar panel. We couldn't turn it off, so you had to be extremely careful not to have any direct contact with the solar panel. If there's any electricity arcing from the solar panel into my spacesuit, filled with 100% oxygen, very bad things can happen. I won't go into details, but so I was thinking a little bit about that, but I was mostly thinking about, well, what if I can't get this done? And so there was a performance anxiety that had to be reckoned with, because we were critical to getting this repair accomplished, or we would have to throw away $1 billion national asset. And so a lot of subtext was going around in the
How
back
did
of.
you overcome that?
Well, I think through years and years of training, being very comfortable in the spacesuit, and also being very comfortable with my teammates, both in space and on the ground. And I realized that if we weren't successful on that particular day, there were already engineers probably in Houston who are working on a plan C and a plan D. And so I knew if we weren't able to accomplish the repair, we at least would complete the spacewalk safely. Doug and I would get back into the space station safely, and we would probably figure out something to do the next day to try to affect the repair. So, but there was certainly a lot weighing on my mind that particular day. I really wanted us to be not only safe and successful in that regard, but to be successful in getting the repair done. And thankfully, the repair worked flawlessly. It was a brilliant plan, and we're able to get it done. And so those repairs are up aboard the ISS, and we'll be there for the life of the International Space Station.
Having accomplished that, did it give you inspiration and hope for future endeavors with spacewalks and achievements and what you could do up in space in and around the ISS on your spacewalks in terms of engineering or anything else?
It's a great question. And, I think back to the very early days when Alexei Leonov, the very first pioneering spacewalks, really it was extraordinary just to get someone out into the vacuum of space and get them safely back in. And I don't know if you've ever read about Alexei Leonov's harrowing efforts to get back into his capsule. He had to actually depressurize his spacesuit to get it flexible enough such that he could scrunch into his airlock and get back into the capsule. And the very first American spacewalk, was pretty basic as well. Can we get someone out there and get them back in? And now you look at, what we did aboard STS-120, what was done to service the Hubble Space Telescope.
Yeah.
It's really extraordinary, the advances in technology, not only in the spacesuits, but in the tools, life support systems. So it really does bode very well for the challenging things we have ahead of us. To go to the south pole of the moon, to set up an outpost there, working at almost absolute zero in terms of temperatures, to extract water ice from those environments, to generate oxygen and to grow plants for sustenance. It's going to be incredibly difficult. Things won't go exactly per plan, and so what's great about the innovation that's happened thus far is we've developed really robust systems and capabilities that I think will allow us to do even more bold and daring things in the future.
What are you hoping to see future astronauts achieve? We're planning to go to the moon again, land the first woman and the second man on the moon. We're planning to go to Mars. What do you expect to see from future astronauts, and how soon do you think we can accomplish those things?
Well, currently there's a plan to land astronauts back on the moon by 2024. I think that's very ambitious. I hope for the best, but I think we need to plan for something a little bit later than that. So I'm excited that some of my colleagues will get the opportunity to be on those extraordinary missions to the moon in this decade. I'll leave it at that. I don't know. I don't want to put any further bounds on how quickly it's going to happen. But ultimately, I think it's human destiny to get to Mars, and I think we're closer to that than ever before, with not only the traditional providers of transportation, the Boeings and Lockheeds of the world, but also companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin that are doing amazing things, and so I would love to see that happen in within 10 to 15 years. I think technologically we can do it. To really create a colony on Mars, not to downplay what Elon Musk is doing, but I really do think we need to up our game technologically. So I think we will need to have tugboats essentially going back and forth between Earth and Mars using plasma ion engines that are a lot faster, that reduce the radiation exposure between here and there. So those things have been invented, they've been demonstrated, but they've not been built in scale. So I think hopefully things like Vazimir will be built, and we'll have these tugboats that will be able to get many people to and from Mars, and also the supplies to set up those colonies.
So why do you think it's important for humanity to colonize Mars?
Well, yeah, we've done such a great job protecting our planet here, haven't we?
Yes.
Exactly. I do think that hopefully we'll do a better job when we go elsewhere. But there are obviously some great challenges there. What is the rule of law? Who's in charge? How does society form? The norms that get established. But I do think that it's human destiny to explore. I think having another outpost in Earth 2.0 makes a lot of sense in terms of sustaining humanity. It's also just, as I said, part of our human nature to explore. I can only imagine what the discovery of life elsewhere will mean for our futures.
What do you think about that? What do you think about extraterrestrial life and its existence?
Well, I don't know that we've ever been visited by little green men or little green women, but I do think that life does exist elsewhere in the universe. In fact, you probably are aware of the Kepler Space Telescope and these other assets that have discovered literally thousands of exoplanets around probably every star in the sky. I think
Kepler
is probably the rule as opposed to the exception. So the conditions for life have to exist elsewhere, and there are emissaries between all of these bodies. So it's quite likely that even human life was seeded from someplace else, just as water was seeded here on this planet by bombardment. Perhaps the rudiments of life were brought here from some distant solar system. So I firmly believe that there's life elsewhere, maybe even in our own solar system, maybe on Mars, maybe on Europa, Enceladus, or Titan, these ice-encrusted moons of our gas giant planets in our own solar system. So maybe on Europa there's Loch Ness Monster, or so we have to look. We have to find out.
And being on the ISS, conducting all these scientific experiments, what has been the most significant one for you, do you think, and why?
Well, it's been extraordinary to be a part of lots of different scientific pursuits, from the life sciences to astrophysics, supporting Hubble, to combustion physics and fluid dynamics, and all these plant biology, all these different types of experiments. But probably the most rewarding for me was on my third mission. I flew into space with my boyhood hero. His name was John Glenn. He's one of our pioneering Mercury astronauts. He spent a wonderful career in the United States Senate, and then came back to fly at age 77 and became an astronaut.
Heard about him.
So I was assigned to that mission to support all the life sciences experiments and to make sure that nothing happened to the good senator and an American hero. And so it was a kind of a high stress job, but it was
pretty much like a bodyguard in space.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What did you learn about our planet from being in space? How did you view our planet? How did it change your perspective on Earth?
Yeah, great thought. What you see from space, as I said earlier, it's kind of soul stirring, but also a bit disquieting when you think about the toll that humanity is taking on the planet. So, nature in general on our planet is just overwhelmingly beautiful. There's no way to really capture it, even in like an IMAX 3D film.
Yeah.
The three-dimensionality of it, the richness of the blues of the ocean, and the scale of the mountains and all that stuff is just extraordinary from that orbital perspective. But then you see bilge dumping in the ocean, or jet contrails, or evidence of deforestation in the Amazon. And so there are scars that we see from Earth orbit as well. And so there's extraordinary beauty, but then there's also this message that's kind of seared in your head. You need to do everything that you possibly can to protect the environment. And so I think everyone who travels into space at some level or another comes back an environmentalist. You can't help but be moved by the fragility of our Earth's atmosphere, the paper thin nature of it, in comparison with the enormity of the universe. And so your eyes are always just kind of gravitationally pulled back down to Earth, and you see all this beauty, but then you cross the Amazon and you see just a smoke pall that goes for thousands of square miles, and that's it's just kind of an interesting.
In terms of any environmental project, is there anything you can tell us about that you did immediately once you came back from space, maybe the first time?
For me, it's made me really want to focus the balance of my life in terms of being a productive member of society, wanting to pay it forward to the degree that I can. I'm a technology CEO, so I'm an inventor, product developer. So trying to use my skill set to do what I can to help humanity. And of course,
about Fluidity Tech. Tell us what you're hoping to achieve with it and how you came about inventing it.
Right. So my company, Fluidity Technologies, is all about converting human intent into motion. And what I mean by that is trying to find ways in which we can very intuitively control, say, a surgical robot inside a human body, or to fly a drone. Our first product line is actually centered on drone flight control, but the same types of control systems can be used for industrial robotics, virtual and augmented reality, computer gaming, computer-aided design, scissor lifts, and industrial cranes, all the way to the teleoperation of surgical robots. So we have control systems that allow for very precise, intuitive motion of a drone through the sky with tactile feedback, so you know exactly what's happening out on your drone. So it's really an immersive way. You almost feel like you're on board the drone as you're flying it, and you can really focus on what you're doing with the drone, which is capturing imagery, the best possible photography that you can. But that same sort of connection that we can have with drones using our technology would give a surgeon, say here in Houston, the ability to teleoperate in sub-Saharan Africa or rural Nepal. And so those are the kinds of things that are really the motivators for me. The reason I actually invented the technology in the first place, I was working in a medical research institute here in Houston and experimenting with Da Vinci surgical robots, which are really extraordinary devices, but very difficult to learn. And unless surgeons are doing these procedures all the time, their outcomes aren't nearly as good, and cases take longer. And so I realized that there had to be a better, more intuitive way to operate these kinds of assets. So I created the technology, patented it, and a couple of years had gone by, and the hospital system hadn't done anything with the technology to license it. So I asked them if they would give me the IP, and they did. And so I grew a company around my IP. Unfortunately, it's very expensive to build surgical robotics technology and get it approved through our FDA. So I chose a market that's quite a bit easier to get into, which is the drone space. But ultimately, we'll get into healthcare for sure.
Do you think, or how do you think your current inventions, including the drones, can help the astronauts aboard the ISS?
Yeah, so anything that moves through physical or virtual space, whether it's a simulation or robotic arm, or even some of these spheres that can move around as assistance inside the volume of the space station, could be using our type of technology. And in fact, I think what our tech will ultimately be very, very useful for is man-machine or human-machine teaming.
Yeah.
So we're going to be using more and more robotics in our daily lives here on Earth as well. And we're using more and more automation, but it won't in the future be as necessary to have a pilot on in the loop, so to speak, at the controls of every asset that we move. We have automated cars on our roads right now, but to have a pilot on the loop to be able to intervene, to take over when things are off nominal, when things are going crazy, or when you just want to do something that's non-scripted, to have simple intuitive tools to be able to control those kinds of actions. And so that's where I think my company is going to be really quite helpful.
It's pretty damn cool. I just want to go back to your career, because I'm interested in the fact that you trained in Moscow with the Russian space agency Mir and the cosmonauts. How different was it to your existing training with NASA, and what did you learn from them?
So we trained in a place called Zvyozhny Gorodak, the Star City, which is where all the pioneering cosmonauts dating back to Yuri Gagarin lived and trained. Yeah. So it was really extraordinary to be on this formerly top secret Russian Air Force base and training alongside folks that were just like me, really. I mean, they have a passion for space exploration, and they had just launched from a different continent. But the methodology was quite different. And of course, the initial days were really pretty challenging because all of the instruction was in Russian. And technical language, as you probably are aware, involves very, very long words. And so learning really how to, what things were, but how to say them was pretty daunting the first several weeks. But through immersive language training, got to participate in that for about 5 months until I figured out that I was too tall to safely fit in the Soyuz capsule in an emergency, and they sent me back home.
Why is there a height limit?
So the Soyuz capsule, if you've ever seen one, is like a mini, if you will. So for someone of my height and build, it's kind of tough to fit into one of those.
Okay.
And so imagine fitting 3 people nestled side by side in the first generation mini, so a very tiny configuration of this capsule.
Okay.
In the years since my experiences there, we've actually worked with the Russians to expand the anthropometric window to allow for larger American astronauts, primarily to fit into the Soyuz capsule. But yeah, back in those days, essentially what you're doing is you basically have your legs strapped to your chest. You're up in a ball, and you're plowing through the atmosphere. Very, very wild ride, apparently. I've never had the opportunity to do it. But right before landing, there's a hydraulic system that raises the seat backs. Mm-hmm. And the concern was that if I were to land in the Soyuz capsule, that raising of the seat back would actually break my knees, and then perhaps the landing itself on hard dirt would break my neck. And so it was a tough call by the engineers, but they made the right decision to pull me from that training.
Oh, that's good. We want to keep you alive. During the American space flights, what actually goes through your mind when you're about to launch and when you're flying? What do astronauts think about? I've always wanted to ask that question.
Well, it's interesting. So I flew after the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. So I didn't know any of those particular astronauts, but that was certainly seared in my mind. The first stage of a space shuttle mission was always puckered with some anticipation. Worrying, will the solid rocket motors hang together? And of course, a lot was learned from that accident. And so typically, there's a considerable amount of butterflies in your chest on launch morning anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get through the first stage, and when the solid rocket boosters would separate from the shuttle, there's kind of a inhalation, a relaxation. It looks like we're going to make it to orbit, and then at main engine cutoff or MECO, we're safely in orbit. We tended to believe that all of the significant risk was behind us. Then we had the STS-107 accident when my close friends, Rick Husband and his crew, didn't make it back home. And that was due to a piece of foam that had come off of our orange external tank, and it hit one of the wings of the space shuttle, created a big gaping hole, and that space shuttle burned up on reentry. And so my last flight, which occurred after STS-107, realized that the risk of spaceflight is around us all the time. Things that we know about, things that we don't know about. Even going outside on a spacewalk, there's orbital debris. If we were hit with a piece of debris traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers an hour, really bad things would likely happen. So you just have to keep your guard up. And the way you control your nerves, I guess, is just to be as well prepared as you possibly can.
You did a lot of training on that, a lot of research on humans in stressful environments and how to cope. What advice would you give to humanity now and this global pandemic that we're in and how it's shaping the environment of the Earth? Like, what advice would you give us?
Well, that's a profound question, and I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer generically for that enormous challenge that everyone is facing right now. But I guess in the context of spaceflight, the way we went into a high-risk environment is by training for success but planning on failure. Mm-hmm. And so you have a plan that you expect to execute, but you realize that it's almost certain that there are going to be pitfalls along the way. So the way you manage that is being as well trained as possible to know how things are supposed to work, how they might break, and then also having a strategy for what you might do if things don't go per plan. And so NASA is brilliant in its capacity to develop, these backup plans, trying to think through everything that might fail and having a contingency plan. But even with all the smart people at NASA, things like what we talked about on STS-120 happen, and with the right team and with the right mental attitude, you can get through those things as well. So, to summarize, I would just say by trying to be as resilient and as well trained as possible, you can take on considerable risk, whether it's going into space, climbing big mountains, or hopefully, collectively getting through this pandemic. The pandemic, I think, is the simple things we all can and should be doing, and I just don't understand why people in my country, at least, are not doing the simple things that can save lives.
Such as?
Wearing masks, avoiding crowds, avoiding indoor dining, washing your hands, keeping your distance. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Unfortunately, we have to kind of get through this for the next 6 months or so until we can all receive immunization. So I think we just need to look after one another. I almost consider it a patriotic duty, to look after myself and to try and avoid the spread of this thing.
That's beautiful. That's very valid. And based on your physical training, your extensive physical and mental training, How different was the journey to you to Mount Everest compared to space flight, and what impact did it have on the body?
Yeah, it has. I'll answer the second part of your question first. It takes an extreme toll on your body. Each time I went to Everest, I lost about 11 kilos of lean muscle mass.
Oh, wow.
So you spend about 8 weeks on the mountain, working at red line every day. You're hypoxic, dehydrated, and shivering cold at many times. And so it's really a challenging thing on the body. And it actually led to an injury that I had to get past. But the same sort of mindset actually went in to going to Mount Everest as I took in preparing for a space shuttle mission. It's the physical preparation, the mental preparation, the understanding the limitations and the strengths of my team. Following good head work, not trying to rush up in bad weather, waiting for the right weather window to approach the summit. So I approached it in very much the same sort of careful mindset that we would use to commit to launching a space shuttle or committing to go outside on a spacewalk.
It's really amazing. And how long was the training? How long did you spend on preparation?
I consider it sort of a lifelong period of training to get ready to go to Everest. I've been climbing since my teens, and so on a technical level, I'd been developing the skills for not only rock climbing but snow and ice climbing, and so I was quite experienced in those areas before I went. But then there's the physical training that you need to do, getting ready to go to Everest, and so it's really intense.
Why do you strive for these challenges? What makes you want to always challenge yourself all the time?
I could ask you that question probably as well. I really do enjoy things, environments where you're called upon to challenge yourself, challenge your problem-solving capabilities.
Yeah.
I also like environments that force us to be creative, to invent new technologies, not only to sustain life, but to extract science from harsh and remote environments. These are great catalysts for innovation, and they oftentimes have very real-world applications back here at sea level. So that's always been a drive for me. Is can we go to this extraordinary place where very few people have ever been before? It's wonderful to be in that rarefied air, and can I use this as a catalyst for building something new, doing something that's never been done before, and then as an inventor, trying to sometimes commercialize some of those things. So.
Okay, so I would say the same thing, usually because I'm very curious. It's very different to what I'm used to, and I want to know what else exists out there, what I can learn from it. As I try to highlight situations about the environment, I try to get people to empathize with these things, so then hopefully it will inspire action. And somebody has to do it. Somebody has to go to, dangerous slums and find out what's happening. Why are people living in those conditions? What can be done about it? How would you be able to solve a problem that you don't even know about? The world is so beautiful and so diverse. We have mountains, caves, jungles, oceans, and it's just beautiful. I love it. Whenever I go to a remote place, I bet you had the same feeling that I had in the Amazon, standing on the top of Mount Everest. Wow, I'm on top of the world. Yeah.
Indeed, and I would even expand it to say, exploration can be even the most mundane. Places that just I've never been before. I'm exploring. It's I think we're all explorers to a degree if we open ourselves to that mindset. My bucket list has never been fuller. There's places on our planet. I've been to all 7 continents, but there are places I need to go back to, and then there are many different parts of the map that I still have yet to explore. And so it doesn't need to, even for me, need to be an extreme adventure. It's just there are things to discover in our everyday world that I'm really excited about as well.
That's true. I like that question, that response, because sometimes you learn things by speaking to new people in your neighborhood. I really value your life and your contributions to the planet and to humanity. Thank you so much.
It's been wonderful talking with you, Sarah, and I look forward to following your exploration pathway in the years ahead. I'm sure there are going to be some extraordinary things ahead for you.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Scott. And I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You as well. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.